The galaxy was vast, filled with civilizations that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. To them, Earth was nothing more than a small blue planet sitting quietly on the edge of space. The great empires thought of humans as young, fragile, and unimportant, like children who had just learned to walk among the stars. They never expected that one day a single human would make them question everything they believed about strength, courage, and survival. This human did not have special powers, did not come from a family of kings, and did not carry any weapon more advanced than the technology of their time. What made this person different was something invisible but stronger than any machine. An unbreakable will, a heart that would not give up, and a spirit that refused to bow down no matter the size of the enemy. Life on Earth had always been a struggle. Humans grew up learning to face storms, hunger, wars, and disasters. From the very beginning, people had survived things that should have destroyed them, yet they always stood back up. It was this history of survival that flowed through the veins of the lone human who now stood before the galaxy. When the first alien contact came, most people expected peace. They hoped for friendship, for sharing knowledge, for building bridges across the stars. But peace was not what the galaxy wanted. The empires saw Earth as weak, divided, and ripe for control. They decided to send a message, a cruel example that would show humans their true place. That message was simple. They would target one person, one single human, and prove that no individual from Earth could ever stand against them. The one chosen did not volunteer. They were not the strongest, nor the richest, nor the most famous. In fact, they were ordinary in almost every way. But fate has a strange way of choosing people, and sometimes the smallest candle is lit in the darkest night. When the aliens came, surrounding Earth with their ships and filling the sky with their power, the people of the planet watched in silence and fear. No one could believe that the fate of their world had been reduced to the life of one human being. The aliens expected this person to surrender, to break down in despair, to beg for mercy. Instead, something else happened. The lone human stood firm. They looked up at the sky filled with alien warships and felt no fear. Deep inside, they knew that if they surrendered, it would mean the end of their people's spirit. They understood that sometimes one person has to carry the weight of many, not because they want to, but because no one else can. In that moment, the aliens saw something they had never expected. They saw defiance in the eyes of someone so small compared to their towering power. They saw courage where they expected weakness, and they saw the beginning of a story they would never forget. The human did not fight with fists or guns. Instead, they fought with words, with actions, and with the quiet strength of refusing to give in. Every attempt by the aliens to scare them only made the human stronger. They tried threats, but the human did not bend. They tried to show their power, but the human did not look away. They even tried to humiliate them, but the human only stood taller, reminding the galaxy that dignity is not something anyone can take away. It is something one chooses to hold on to. Slowly, the world began to watch. The people of Earth, who had always argued and fought among themselves, started to see something different. They saw themselves in that one person. They saw their own struggles, their own dreams, their own hopes, reflected in the quiet bravery of the lone human. For the first time in a long time, Earth felt united by something greater than fear. The aliens, however, could not understand it. To them, strength was measured in armies, in weapons, in planets, conquered and resources taken. They had never understood the kind of strength that comes from within. The lone human was teaching them a lesson they had not asked for. Day after day, they tried to break the human spirit, but nothing worked. Instead, every attempt only made the human's resolve stronger. The galaxy, filled with watchers from distant stars, began to whisper. Who was this human? Why had the empires failed to crush them so easily? Why was one small voice enough to shake an entire empire's confidence? What no alien could understand was that the human was not truly alone. They carried with them the voices of billions, the laughter of children, the wisdom of elders, the dreams of those who wanted a better future. Every memory of struggle on Earth lived inside them. Every story of survival, every scar from history, every moment when humanity almost fell but found a way to rise again, it was all there in the heart of one person. That was why they could not be broken. They were not standing only for themselves. They were standing for everyone. Nights were long, and the human often found themselves staring at the stars, wondering what the future would hold. Fear was there. Of course, it always was. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing to keep going, even when fear whispers in your ear. And so the human kept standing. They kept facing the alien power with nothing more than their will. And slowly, the people of Earth began to rise with them. Across the planet, stories spread of the one who stood against the galaxy. Children asked about them. Elders prayed for them. Families lit candles in their honor. It was as if one human had become the soul of the entire world. The aliens realized too late what had begun. They thought they were fighting one human. In truth, they had awakened the spirit of an entire species. Humanity was no longer just watching. They were preparing. They were uniting. And it all began because one person refused to kneel. The lone human had become a symbol, a spark in the darkness, reminding everyone that even the smallest voice can echo across the stars. The galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The lone human had not fired a weapon or won a battle, yet they had already achieved something greater. They had shown the galaxy that humans could not be underestimated. They had shown that strength was not just about power, but about heart, about spirit, about never giving up even when the odds were impossible. And this was only the beginning. The story of the lone human was far from over. The galaxy was watching, Earth was awakening, and what started as one person's stand was about to become humanity's greatest fight. The lone human had already surprised the galaxy by standing firm when everyone expected them to break. But the aliens were not ready to admit defeat. To them, the idea that one small being from a young world could resist their might was unthinkable. Their pride was wounded, and wounded pride can be more dangerous than any weapon. They decided it was time to prove their superiority in a way that no one could deny. That was when the challenge was given. It was not a battle of armies or fleets, not a war of planets or empires. No, the aliens wanted to make it personal. They wanted to humiliate Earth by forcing this one human into an impossible test. The challenge was meant to be a public spectacle, watched not only by their own people, but by countless other species across the stars. They wanted the galaxy to see Earth bend, to see humanity accept that they were weak and powerless. The announcement shook the planet. The alien voice echoed across every channel, every screen, every frequency. They declared that Earth's fate would rest on the actions of a single person. The lone human, the one who had refused to kneel, was now chosen to face trials designed to break even the strongest of minds and bodies. If they failed, Earth would pay the price. If they somehow succeeded, the aliens claimed they would consider showing mercy. It was a cruel bargain, but the human had no choice. To walk away would mean abandoning the hope that had already spread across the world. The first trial came quickly. It was not physical, but mental. The aliens wanted to show that human minds were weak compared to theirs. They placed the human inside a chamber filled with strange lights and sounds designed to confuse and overwhelm. Patterns shifted endlessly, voices whispered from nowhere, visions played tricks on the senses. For most species, the chamber was a prison of the mind, a place where even the bravest would break down and beg for release. But the human did something unexpected. Instead of fighting against the storm of illusions, They closed their eyes. They remembered the sound of rain back on Earth, the feel of grass under their feet, the laughter of people they loved. They anchored themselves to something no machine could touch, their own memories, their own heart. Slowly, the illusions lost their power. The humans stood tall when the test was over, and the aliens were forced to admit that their first attempt had failed. The second trial was of the body. The aliens brought forth a vast arena filled with challenges meant to test endurance and strength. Gravity was shifted to crushing levels, heat waves rolled in, and obstacles rose high like mountains. Creatures bred for combat were released too, intimidate and terrify. The crowd of alien onlookers roared, expecting the human to collapse within minutes. After all, how could one small being from a fragile planet withstand such punishment? The humans staggered at first, their muscles screaming under the weight, their lungs burning in the heavy air. But then something inside pushed them forward. They remembered the generations of humans who had carried heavy burdens, who had farmed rocky lands, who had worked in mines, who had marched through deserts and frozen landscapes. Humanity's strength was not in perfection, but in persistence. Step by step, the human kept moving, refusing to stop. Every fall was followed by rising again. Every cut, every bruise, every stumble became part of their journey forward. By the end, when the last obstacle fell, the arena was silent. The aliens had not expected survival, let alone victory, but the trials were not finished. The third test was designed to break the spirit. The aliens understood that the human had endured illusions and pain, but now they wanted to target the heart. They presented visions of loved ones in danger, voices of people crying out for help, scenes that twisted the soul. It was cruel, because it preyed on the one thing humans cared about most: others. The human trembled. For the first time, doubt crept in. The weight of responsibility was almost too much. Could they truly carry the hope of an entire world? Could they bear the pain of watching illusions of their people suffering, even knowing it wasn't real? For a moment, it seemed as though this test might finally break them. But then, deep within, the human remembered something simple. Humanity had never survived alone. Through history, people had always lifted each other up. They had sung songs, in dark times, shared food in hunger, and held hands through storms. This was what made them human, the unshakable bond with one another. And so, instead of giving in to despair, the humans stood taller. They declared aloud that no illusion could erase what was real, the love and unity of their people. That strength was untouchable. The aliens watching from their great ships were unsettled. To them, this was not how it was supposed to go. The challenge had been designed to prove weakness, but instead it was revealing strength they did not understand. This lone human was not winning with advanced weapons or great power. They were winning with something invisible, something the aliens could not measure: resilience, compassion, hope. The trials dragged on for days. Hunger gnawed at the human, exhaustion weighed heavily, and every moment was filled with new traps and tests. Yet every time the aliens thought they had won, the human found a way to endure. Sometimes it was through sheer stubbornness, sometimes through clever thinking, and sometimes through the simple refusal to let go of hope. Back on Earth, people watched with growing awe. Streets were silent when the trials were broadcast. Children whispered about the courage of the lone human. Elders wept quietly, remembering times in their own lives when survival had felt impossible. This one person had become more than a symbol. They had become proof that even the smallest spark could light a fire strong enough to be seen across the stars. The final stage of the alien challenge came without warning. The human was brought before the leaders of the alien empire, surrounded by towering figures with eyes that glowed like fire. They asked one final question: would the human kneel and accept alien rule to save their people, or would they stand and risk Earth's destruction? The silence that followed was heavy. Billions of lives hung in the balance. The human's body was broken, their mind exhausted, their spirit tested to its limits. But in that silence, a memory returned. The countless voices of Earth cheering them on. The faith of a world that had already united behind them. With a steady breath, the human raised their head and refused to kneel. The aliens hissed in frustration. They had wanted a spectacle of weakness, but what they had instead created was a legend. The galaxy had witnessed something unforgettable, the power of one human who could not be broken. For the first time, the aliens hesitated. For the first time, they questioned whether humanity was as weak as they had thought. And for the first time, they realized that perhaps this challenge had not humbled Earth. It had awakened it. The lone human had faced the alien challenge and endured. But this was not the end. It was only the beginning of a story that would echo across stars and galaxies. A story that would remind everyone watching that sometimes the smallest voice, the smallest person, can hold the strength of an entire world. When the lone human refused to kneel before the alien rulers, the decision echoed across the entire galaxy. It was more than just a single act of defiance. It was a spark that lit a fire inside billions of hearts back on Earth. That moment marked a turning point. Humanity, long divided by borders, languages, and disagreements, suddenly found itself bound by one powerful truth. If one human could stand up against the galaxy, then together they could rise even higher. At first, there was silence. People everywhere stared at their screens, hardly believing what they had witnessed. Then came the realization. This one person was standing not just for themselves, but for every human alive. And in that moment, hesitation melted away. The old arguments that had separated nations seemed smaller than ever before. Political rivalries, cultural differences, even long-standing resentments. Suddenly they did not matter. What mattered was survival. What mattered was pride. What mattered was unity. From the bustling cities to the quiet villages, from mountain peaks to desert sands, humanity began to move as one. Leaders who once argued over power now sat side by side at tables, understanding that their strength depended on each other. Engineers and scientists worked through sleepless nights, sharing discoveries instead of hoarding them. Artists painted, singers wrote songs, and storytellers filled the air with words of hope that traveled faster than any weapon. Humanity was not just preparing for war. They were preparing to remind the galaxy of who they truly were. The alien empire had expected Earth to crumble in fear, to surrender quietly and accept its place at the bottom of the stars. Instead, they found a planet that had never been more alive. Ships were built not in secret, but in full view of the people. Families donated resources, workers volunteered, and children carried banners of hope in the streets. Everyone, in their own way, contributed to the great stand. The air was filled with something powerful, something stronger than fear. It was determination. The lone human who had survived the trials became more than a hero. They became a symbol of unity. Their story was told and retold, painted on walls, sung in songs, whispered in schools. People spoke of the illusions they had resisted, the trials they had endured, the choice they had made when kneeling would have been easier. The message was clear. If one person could resist, then so could all. But unity was not just words. It had to become action. Across Earth, militaries combined their forces, not as separate nations, but as one defense for the planet. Scientists unlocked technologies once kept secret, blending knowledge from every corner of the world. Medical experts prepared to care for the wounded, while builders reinforced shelters. Farmers grew extra crops to feed soldiers and workers. Humanity was preparing for something they had never done before, not to fight one another, but to fight together for survival. It wasn't easy. Old suspicions lingered. Some leaders still doubted others, wondering if unity would last or if betrayal might come at the worst moment. There were arguments, clashes of pride, and moments of fear, but each time division threatened to return, people looked again at the lone human who had faced the alien challenge. They remembered the strength of standing tall even when broken, the courage of refusing to kneel. That memory pulled them back into unity. In every street, banners flew with words of encouragement. In every school, teachers spoke of resilience and hope. In every home, families gathered to share stories of strength. Humanity was not perfect, but it had discovered something new. When they stood together, they were far greater than the sum of their parts. The aliens watched all this with growing unease. Their plan had been simple: break one human, break Earth. Instead, they had created something they had never faced before. A united humanity was unpredictable, dangerous, and powerful in ways that no calculation could measure. For the first time, the alien empire began to feel a flicker of doubt. As Earth prepared, messages began to spread not only among humans, but also among other species across the stars. Some watched with pity, expecting Earth to be destroyed. Others, however, felt something different: admiration. Many species had lived under alien rule for centuries, bowing their heads in silence. But now they saw something they had forgotten was possible: resistance. The lone human's defiance and Earth's unity was becoming a beacon of hope far beyond the planet itself. Back on Earth, the preparation continued. In vast hangars, ships gleamed under lights as crews tested engines. Pilots trained in simulators that mimicked alien maneuvers. Engineers studied captured alien machines, learning their weaknesses, adapting them for human use. But it wasn't just soldiers or scientists who carried the burden. Ordinary people found ways to help. A farmer giving food, a teacher spreading courage, a child drawing a picture of hope. Every action mattered. Every voice added to the chorus of unity, and through it all, the lone human remained at the center. Not a ruler, not a commander, but a reminder of what one act of courage could inspire. They visited the people, spoke to crowds, and reminded everyone that the true power of humanity was not in weapons or technology, but in their unbreakable spirit. There were nights when fear crept in. People knew the aliens were stronger, more advanced, more experienced. Whispers spread in dark corners. What if unity wasn't enough? What if they failed? But then someone would speak up, reminding them of what had already been achieved. A child would say, "If one human can stand, then we can too." An elder would add, "We have survived every storm before. This is just another one." And slowly, hope would return. The time of waiting stretched on, heavy and tense. But Earth was no longer the same planet it had been before. Something inside had changed. Borders had blurred, divisions had thinned, and humanity had discovered what it truly meant to stand together. When the aliens finally prepared their fleet, Earth was ready, not with fear, but with unity. Across the skies, lights shone from cities, where people gathered to watch, not in silence but with songs of hope. Across the oceans, ships sailed carrying supplies and support. Across the mountains and deserts, people looked up at the stars, not with dread, but with determination. Humanity had never been perfect, but now it had found its strength. And that strength was not in weapons or machines, though they had plenty. It was in the simple truth that no power in the galaxy could defeat a people who stood side by side, shoulder to shoulder, heart to heart. The alien challenge had been meant to break one human. Instead, it had awakened all of humanity. The galaxy would soon see not just one voice of defiance, but billions. And so, as the alien fleet began to move, so too did Earth. This was no longer about one lone figure standing in the spotlight. This was about an entire world rising together, united by courage, bonded by hope, ready to show the galaxy what it meant to be human. This was the moment when humanity stood together, and in that unity, they found the greatest weapon of all. The day finally arrived when preparation turned into reality. For weeks, humanity had stood together, building, training, and gathering courage for what everyone knew was coming. The skies that morning looked the same as always, but deep inside, people sensed the shift. There was a heaviness in the air, a silence before the storm. Children clung to their parents, elders whispered prayers, and workers paused just long enough to lift their eyes to the heavens, knowing that soon, everything would change. The alien fleet came like a shadow across the stars. Their ships were massive, dark, and endless in number, blotting out the sunlight as they approached Earth's orbit. The sight was terrifying, yet it also confirmed what humanity already knew. The galaxy's rulers had not come to negotiate. They had come to crush, to remind Earth of its place, to punish them for daring to resist. But this time, humanity was not alone. They were not divided. They stood together as one. In command, centers spread across the planet, screens lit up with data as satellites tracked the enemy fleet. Military leaders, scientists, and volunteers worked side by side, their voices calm but steady. Orders were given, but they did not sound like commands. They sounded like promises, like commitments to defend every life on Earth. In the skies, Earth's own ships waited, smaller and fewer than the alien armada, but glowing with the spirit of the people who had built them. The first wave of alien fire struck like thunder. Energy beams cut through the sky, targeting defense systems on the ground. Cities shook as explosions echoed, but humanity did not break. Sirens wailed, shelters opened, and emergency teams rushed forward with practiced precision. In the chaos, one truth held firm: no one would stand alone. Rescue workers carried the injured, strangers shielded strangers, and communities acted as one beating heart. Then came Earth's answer. From launch sites across the planet, missiles shot into the sky, trailing fire behind them. Spacecraft rose. Like arrows, engines blazing, carrying humans who knew they might never return but refused to bow. The clash had begun. For the first time in history, Earth was not fighting itself. It was fighting for itself. The lone human who had defied the aliens earlier now stood at the forefront of this struggle. They did not lead with orders but with example, stepping into the heart of battle as a reminder that courage was stronger than fear. Their presence fueled the fighters, reminding every pilot, every soldier, and every civilian that this was not a hopeless fight. It was a fight for dignity, for freedom, for the right to exist without chains. The confrontation grew, fiercer with each passing hour. Alien ships rained fire upon Earth, but the planet's defenses struck back with surprising strength. Humans used creativity where they lacked technology, turning the simplest tools into weapons, finding weaknesses in alien shields, and adapting faster than the enemy expected. What the aliens had thought would be a swift punishment was turning into a struggle they could not easily win. In orbit, battles raged with blinding flashes of light. Human pilots darted between massive alien cruisers, using speed and teamwork to outmaneuver their enemy. They fought not as individuals but as one living organism, covering each other, protecting each other, and sacrificing when needed. When a ship fell, another rushed to fill the gap, refusing to let the line break. Every death fueled not despair, but determination. On the ground, humanity's resilience shone even brighter. Cities under attack refused to surrender. When buildings fell, people pulled each other from the rubble and kept fighting. When power grids collapsed, communities lit fires and carried on. The aliens expected Earth to break under pressure, but instead, they watched as every strike only hardened the humans further. It was as if the planet itself had become unyielding, every stone, every tree, every drop of blood screaming the same message: we will not fall. The aliens, for the first time, began to hesitate. Their commanders had entered this battle with arrogance, certain of victory. But the resistance they faced was unlike anything they had encountered before. These humans did not run, they did not kneel, and they did not fight only with weapons. They fought with unity, with creativity, with an unbreakable spirit. Every small victory the aliens achieved came at a cost greater than they had anticipated. As the hours turned into days, the great confrontation became more than a battle of weapons. It became a battle of wills. The aliens sought to prove dominance. Humanity sought to prove its right to exist. And slowly, the balance began to shift. Earth's people, fueled by their shared determination, found ways to turn the tide. Engineers on the ground sent new strategies to pilots mid-battle. Civilians created networks to guide survivors and share vital information. Humanity was fighting not just with soldiers, but with the strength of everyone, everywhere. The lone human at the heart of it all refused to falter. Though tired, though wounded, they carried on, becoming the symbol of Earth's defiance. When others stumbled, they lifted them. When fear threatened to spread, they silenced it with unshakable resolve. Their courage reminded everyone that this was not about one person anymore. It was about an entire world standing tall. The confrontation reached its peak in orbit, where Earth's fleet clashed with the alien flagship. The massive vessel towered over human ships, armed with weapons strong enough to wipe out entire cities in seconds. It seemed unbeatable. But humanity did not retreat. They circled it like hunters, targeting its weak points, distracting its guns, and slowly tearing away its defenses. Ship after ship gave everything to hold the line, and finally, in one blinding strike, the flagship was hit where it was most vulnerable. Flames erupted, and for the first time, the galaxy's rulers realized they were not invincible. Cheers echoed across Earth when the flagship began to fall. Not because the war was over, but because hope had taken root. Humanity had shown that even the mightiest could bleed, even the strongest could fall. And that victory, no matter how small, belonged to every person who had stood together. But the battle was not yet finished. The alien fleet still surrounded Earth, still outnumbered the humans, still carried more advanced technology. Yet something had shifted. The humans were no longer fighting as if defeat was certain. They were fighting with the knowledge that victory, however unlikely, was possible. And that made all the difference. The great confrontation was not just about ships, weapons, or strategy. It was about something deeper, about the will of a people who refused to be broken, about the unity of billions standing as one. The aliens had come expecting submission. Instead, they found resistance so fierce, so determined, that it began to shake even their confidence. As the smoke of battle filled the skies, as cities burned and ships fell, humanity stood unyielding. They had paid dearly, but they had proven something that could never be taken away. They were not weak, they were not divided, and they would never bow. The great confrontation was far from over. But one truth had been carved into history: the galaxy would never again see Earth as small. It would see humanity for what it had become, a force bound by unity, courage, and the fire of survival. And the aliens, for the first time, began to understand fear. The sky was heavy with smoke, and the Earth seemed to tremble under the weight of battle. For days, humanity had fought with everything it had, pushing back against the alien fleet that had once seemed unstoppable. The confrontation had tested the planet like never before, and still the fight raged on. Ships continued to clash above the clouds, cities lit with fire and determination, and people stood shoulder to shoulder, refusing to yield. The aliens had expected surrender by now. They had expected Earth to break under their advanced weapons and overwhelming numbers. But the opposite had happened. Each strike had only fueled human strength. Each loss had made the survivors fight harder. The invaders had underestimated something they could not measure: human spirit. In orbit, the battle grew more desperate. Alien cruisers circled Earth like vultures, raining destruction from above, while human ships darted among them like sparks of fire. The difference in size and power was clear, yet Earth's pilots moved with a determination that no machine could replicate. They fought not only with weapons, but with everything they were: creativity, instinct, and the will to protect their world. On the ground, humanity was no less fierce. When power plants were destroyed, engineers rigged together makeshift generators. When roads were blocked, ordinary people cleared them with bare hands so rescue teams could pass. When food became scarce, communities shared what little they had, refusing to let anyone starve. The aliens had thought Earth would crumble in chaos, but what they saw instead was unity, stronger than any weapon. At the heart of this struggle stood the lone human who had first defied the alien empire. Their bravery had sparked the resistance, and now they fought among the people not as a commander above them, but as one of them. Their presence was a living reminder that one act of defiance could inspire billions. Whenever spirits faltered, a single look at them brought strength back into weary hearts. The turning point came when humanity struck at the alien flagship once more. The massive vessel, larger than any Earth city, hung in orbit like a shadow. Its weapons could annihilate entire regions in moments. For weeks, it had been the greatest threat, the symbol of alien power. Yet humanity refused to let it remain untouchable. Scientists, engineers, and soldiers worked together, studying its movements, its defenses, its weaknesses. Piece by piece, they formed a plan. The attack began at dawn. Human ships surged forward in coordinated waves, drawing the flagship's fire and forcing it to spread its weapons thin. Ground defenses launched missiles with precision, striking where the shields were weakest. For hours, the sky was filled with fire, the sound of thunder echoing across the planet. It was a gamble, a fight that could cost everything. But humanity had reached a point where retreat was no longer an option. The lone human joined the assault, piloting a craft battered and scarred from days of battle. With every maneuver, they pushed closer to the flagship, guiding others, showing them where to strike. The alien vessel roared with fury, unleashing its might, but Earth's defenders refused to be broken. Ship after ship fell, yet new ones rose in their place. Every sacrifice opened the path a little wider. Finally, the moment came. A weakness revealed itself, not in the flagship's weapons, but in its arrogance. Its defenses had focused so much on crushing the main attack that it left a vulnerable point unguarded. Humanity seized the chance. A coordinated strike was launched, piercing the flagship's hull with devastating force. The explosion shook the skies, lighting up the heavens with fire. The alien flagship, symbol of their dominance, began to fall. That sight sent a wave of hope across the planet. From underground shelters to command rooms, from battlefield medics to families huddled together, cheers erupted. The impossible had been done. The mightiest ship of the galaxy had been brought down by the people of Earth. But victory was not yet complete. The alien fleet, though shaken, still surrounded the planet. Yet something had changed. Fear had entered their ranks. For the first time, the invaders hesitated. They had expected an easy conquest, a swift reminder of their power. Instead, they were bleeding, losing ships and facing a resistance fiercer than any they had ever known. Humanity pressed forward. Tired, wounded, but unstoppable, They launched every remaining ship, every last weapon, every ounce of strength. The lone human's voice carried across channels, urging the fighters onward, reminding them why they fought. This is our home. This is our sky. This is our Earth, and no one will take it from us. The battle raged through the night. Alien ships tried to regroup, but humanity refused to give them the chance. With relentless coordination, Earth's defenders pushed them back, tearing through formations, disabling weapons, forcing retreat. It was not technology alone that carried them. It was determination, the refusal to bow, the knowledge that this fight would define their future. At last, the aliens made their choice. Their fleet, battered and broken, began to pull away from Earth. One by one, their ships turned from the planet and retreated into the darkness of space. They had come to crush one human, to teach Earth its place. Instead, they had learned fear. They had faced a unity they could not defeat, a spirit they could not shatter. For the first time in their reign, they had been forced to flee. When the last alien ship vanished into the stars, silence fell over the planet. A silence filled not with fear, but with awe. Humanity had stood against the galaxy, and had not only survived, but triumphed. It was not just a military victory. It was a victory of will, of spirit, of unity. Across Earth, people wept, cheered, embraced, and prayed. They mourned the lost, honored the brave, and celebrated the dawn of a new chapter. The lone human who had sparked it all stood quietly among the people, no different from those around them, except for the knowledge that their defiance had ignited a fire that spread across the world. Humanity had changed forever. No longer would they see themselves as fragile or small. They had faced the greatest force in the galaxy and proven that they were not to be underestimated. They had shown that unity was stronger than fear, that courage could overcome might, and that even in the darkest hour, light could rise. This was more than survival. This was humanity's greatest victory. And the galaxy, whether it wished to or not, would remember it for all time.